My name is Alara Vance. For the last 5 years, my life has been circumscribed by the tinted glass walls of the Sterling Advisory Group, a world of muted grays and calculated silences in the heart of Port Meridian. I grew up in a quiet town nestled in a river valley, where my mother was the head librarian. She taught me that the most powerful stories are often found in the hushed spaces, in the margins, and that patience is a form of strength. I carried that lesson with me through a scholarship-funded education and into the polished, aggressive ecosystem of corporate consulting, believing, perhaps naively, that quiet competence would eventually speak for itself. It did not. It was often spoken over. I learned that my methodical, data-driven insights were most valuable when they were co-opted and presented by a male colleague with more bravado. I learned that my dedication, which kept me at my desk long after the city lights had painted strokes of neon across my window, was seen not as commitment, but as a lack of a fuller life. A life that included golf courses and steak dinners where the real decisions were made. Only one person saw through the quiet exterior to the intricate work I was doing, Annalise Croft. She was a senior partner, a woman who moved through the firm like a ghost ship, silent, powerful, and navigating currents no one else seemed to perceive. She had reached a level of success that commanded a grudging respect, but she was an island in the firm's sea of tailored suits and clubbish camaraderie. The day she called me into her office for the first time, I assumed I had made some critical error. Her office was different from the others. The standard issue chrome and leather were softened by a deep teal accent wall, shelves overflowing with books on art and history, and a small, thriving orchid on her desk. "Alara," she said, her voice calm and clear, gesturing to the chair opposite her. "Tell me about the Atherton proposal." The Atherton proposal was a project I had poured 2 months of my life into, only to watch my direct superior, Marcus Thorne, present it as his own, accepting the accolades with a confident smile. "It's solid," I said, offering the diplomatic response. Annalise's gaze was unwavering. "I didn't ask for the company line. I asked for your assessment." Something in her directness disarmed me. "It's fundamentally cautious," I admitted, the words feeling like a small rebellion. "It meets the client's stated needs, but it ignores the underlying market shift we identified in the preliminary data. We've given them a solution for today, not for the next 5 years." A slow, genuine smile touched her lips. "Exactly. And why wasn't that in the final presentation?" Marcus felt it was too speculative. That the client wasn't ready for that conversation. "Marcus is a fine caretaker of the present," Annalise said, her words precise. "He lacks the vision for the future. You, on the other hand, see the patterns." She leaned forward slightly. "I've been watching you, Alara. You do the work of a senior analyst, but you're consistently passed over. Do you know why?" I thought of the promotion that had gone to a man with 2 years less experience. I thought of the client meetings where questions were directed to the junior male associate beside me. "I don't play the game," I said, the phrase tasting bitter. "Don't ever start," she advised. "Their game is rigged. The only way to win is to build your own." That conversation was the beginning of our quiet alliance. Annalise became my mentor, though we never used the word. She didn't shield me from the firm's politics, but she taught me how to navigate them. She'd forward me a critical email with a one-word note, "Observe." Or she'd ask me to sit in on a high-level meeting, not to speak, but to listen. "Pay attention to what isn't said," she'd tell me later. "That's where the truth lives." Under her guidance, I flourished. I built a reputation for untangling impossible problems, for finding elegant solutions in complex data. But my name never appeared on the final reports. My bonuses were modest, while the men who presented my work bought new cars. I was a ghostwriter for their success. Then, 6 months ago, everything changed. Annalise called me to her home on a Sunday afternoon. I had never seen her outside the office. Her house was a restored brownstone on a quiet, tree-lined street, filled with light and art and the scent of lemon and old paper. She looked smaller, more fragile than I had ever seen her. She poured us each a cup of jasmine tea, her hand trembling slightly. "I have something to tell you," she said, her voice losing none of its clarity. "And it must remain between us." She told me she had been diagnosed with a rare, aggressive form of cancer. The doctors had given her 6 months, maybe less. I felt the air leave my lungs, the porcelain cup suddenly cold in my hands. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. "When I'm gone," she continued, her gaze fixed on the garden outside her window, "they will dismantle my life's work. They'll see my client list not as relationships to be nurtured, but as assets to be carved up and distributed. They'll hand them to Marcus and the others, who don't understand the nuances, the histories. Within a year, half of those clients will be gone." She paused, then turned to look at me directly. "Unless they're no longer the company's clients to lose." Her plan was audacious, terrifying, and brilliant. For 2 decades, Annalise had cultivated what she called her artisan portfolio, a collection of 23 clients. They weren't the firm's largest accounts, but they were its most loyal. They were small-batch wineries, independent publishers, bespoke furniture makers, and family-owned textile mills. Collectively, they represented nearly $1 million in annual retainers, built not on contracts, but on decades of trust. "These relationships are personal," she explained. "They're with me, Annalise Croft, not with Sterling Advisory Group. The firm has forgotten that. We're going to remind them." Over the next 5 months, we began a delicate and clandestine dance. Officially, Annalise was delegating some of her responsibilities to me as she began a reduced schedule for health reasons. In reality, she was orchestrating the transfer of her legacy. We traveled together, visiting the sun-drenched vineyards in the north and the dusty, sweet-smelling woodshops in the south. Annalise introduced me not as her subordinate, but as her partner. "Ilara sees the world as I do," she told a third-generation weaver whose family had been her client for 15 years. To a young, innovative ceramicist, she said, "Trust Ilara's instincts. They're better than mine." I fell in love with these clients. I learned the names of their children, the stories of their grandparents. I listened to their dreams and their fears. This wasn't the sterile, data-driven work of Sterling. This was human. It was real. Back at the office, the whispers grew. Marcus would watch me from his glass-walled office, his expression a mixture of suspicion and resentment. Spending a lot of time with Annalise, he remarked one day at the coffee station, "Hoping for a shortcut to the top?" I just smiled. "I'm learning a great deal." 2 weeks before she died, Annalise had me meet her with her personal attorney, a sharp, kind woman named Evelyn Reed. On a polished mahogany table, they laid out the paperwork. Legal transfer of contact agreements, signed by every single one of the 23 clients. Each document affirmed that their primary business relationship was with me, Ilara Vance, and that they consented to this relationship continuing independently of Sterling Advisory Group. "Is this legal?" I whispered, my heart pounding. "Perfectly," Evelyn said. Annalise built these relationships before Sterling even acquired her old firm. The original agreements give her an unusual degree of personal control. They never bothered to read the fine print. They just saw the revenue. Annalise slid the file across the table to me. "Keep these somewhere safe. Not your home, not the office. They will come for you after I'm gone, Ilara. They will try to bully you, to intimidate you. They will underestimate you. That will be your greatest advantage. Let them." I secured a safe deposit box that afternoon. 3 days later, I received the call from Annalise's sister. She had passed peacefully in her sleep. The grief was a physical blow, a hollow ache in my chest. She was more than a mentor. She had become my friend, the one person who had truly seen me. But beneath the sorrow, her final instructions echoed in my mind. "Let them show you who they are." The company's performance of Sorrow was impeccable. A firm-wide email praised Annalise's immeasurable contributions. At her memorial service, our CEO, Mr. Davies, gave a moving eulogy that spoke of her as a pillar of the Sterling family. After the service, Marcus cornered me, placing a heavy hand on my shoulder. His sympathy felt like a shroud. "Such a tragedy," he said, his eyes cold and assessing. We'll need to meet soon to discuss a smooth transition for her accounts. Of course, I murmured, looking at the floor. Whatever the firm needs. That evening, I drafted my resignation letter. The next morning, I sent it via certified mail, giving 2 weeks' notice, effective immediately. I knew I wouldn't be there for 2 weeks, but the letter was a necessary formality, a timestamp on my departure. The following day, the expected summons arrived. Mr. Davies wanted to see me. In his cavernous office overlooking the city, he got straight to the point. We need a complete list of Annalise's clients and all related files. I handed him a folder. It contained details on 3 large, corporate accounts Annalise had managed, but no mention of the artisan portfolio. He frowned, flipping through the pages. This is incomplete. Where's the rest of it? The smaller accounts, the wineries, the artisans. I met his gaze, my expression a carefully constructed mask of dutiful confusion. I'm not sure what you mean. She handled those relationships very personally. I was only involved on a case-by-case basis. The files must be in her office. His jaw tightened. Find them. For the next week, I performed a meticulous and entirely fruitless search of Annalise's office. I packed her books and personal effects for her sister, while Marcus and his team scoured her digital files, growing more frantic each day. The quarterly projections were looming, and $1 million hole had just appeared in their forecast. They found nothing. Annalise had been scrupulous. There was no trace of the artisan portfolio on any company server. Then, exactly 1 week after Annalise's funeral, I was called into Marcus's office. The HR manager was already there, her expression carefully neutral. It was time. I stood in Marcus's office trying to process his words. Pack your things. Your position has been eliminated. The termination hit me, but not with the shock he expected. It was the final, predictable move in a game I was now prepared for. The timing wasn't coincidental. I kept my expression perfectly neutral despite the quiet hum of victory inside me. I understand. We'll need all client information transferred immediately, he continued, his voice laced with an urgency he couldn't quite conceal. Especially any contacts you've been handling directly. He slid a folder across his desk, the same gesture of power I'd seen 100 times. I took the folder without opening it. Of course. And, he added, leaning forward, we'll need details about the artisan portfolio. Annalise mentioned them. We know you were involved. That's when I knew for certain they had nothing. No idea that the entire portfolio had been legally and officially transferred to me days before her death. No idea that my resignation letter was already on record, predating my termination. I'll gather everything I have, I promised with a pleasant, helpful smile. Marcus seemed almost disappointed by my composure. He had anticipated tears, perhaps a desperate plea to keep my job. Instead, he got a professionalism that clearly unsettled him. You have until the end of the day, he said, dismissing me with a wave of his hand. I walked out of his office, past the curious stares of my colleagues. Some looked away, guilty. Others watched with undisguised satisfaction. One less competitor. At my desk, a small cardboard box provided by HR was waiting for me. How thoughtful. I began to pack my few personal items, a framed photo of my parents, a collection of poetry, and the small, smooth river stone I kept on my desk to remind me of home. Clara from the adjacent department approached, her face etched with concern. Is it true? She whispered. My position has been eliminated, I replied, carefully wrapping the stone in tissue paper. That's insane, she said. You're the best analyst we have. Everyone knows it. Business decisions, I said with a small shrug. What I didn't say was that this wasn't a business decision. It was a tantrum. It was the desperate act of men who had been outmaneuvered and couldn't stand it. As I placed the last item in the box, I felt a profound sense of lightness. I wasn't being fired from a job, I was being liberated from a cage. As I walked toward the elevators, box in hand, Marcus stepped out of his office. Vance, he said, his voice low and sharp. Before you go, those files. This isn't personal, it's just business. I stopped and turned to face him, allowing myself a small, real smile for the first time that day. Actually, Marcus, I said, my voice soft but clear. The best business is always personal. I stepped into the elevator, and as the doors slid shut on his stunned, angry face, I took my first breath of genuinely free air. This wasn't an ending. It was the beginning Annalise had given me. The morning after my termination, I woke to the gentle sound of rain against my windowpane, not the jarring beep of an alarm. The silence in my small apartment was a luxury. For 5 years, my mornings had been a frantic race against the clock. Today, I had all the time in the world. I made coffee and sat by the window, watching the rain wash the city clean. My phone lay on the table, buzzing intermittently with texts from Clara and a few other former colleagues, their messages a mix of outrage and concern. I replied to each one with a simple, reassuring phrase, "I'm fine. A new chapter is starting." It was the truth. While Sterling had been scrambling, I had been building. The day after Annalise's memorial, I had signed the lease on a small, second-floor office in the city's historic waterfront district. It was a beautiful space with exposed brick walls, high ceilings, and large arched windows that looked out over the river. It was the kind of place one of Annalise's artisans might choose. The paperwork for my new firm, Vance and Croft Consulting, was already filed. Annalise had been insistent. "Have your foundation in place before the storm hits," she'd advised. "When they push you out, you need a place to land." My phone rang, an unfamiliar number. I took a sip of coffee before answering, my voice calm. "Alara Vance speaking." "MS. Vance. This is Julian Hayes from the legal department at Sterling Advisory Group." His voice was smooth, practiced. "It has come to our attention that there may be some irregularities concerning the client accounts formerly managed by Annalise Croft." "There are no irregularities on my end, Mr. Hayes," I said politely. "Perhaps I should be more direct," he said, his tone hardening slightly. "Those accounts are the property of Sterling. Any attempt to solicit or divert them is a violation of your employment agreement and constitutes tortious interference. We must insist you cease all contact with these clients immediately." This was the first salvo, just as Annalise and Evelyn had predicted. "I am no longer an employee of Sterling," I said. "And I would prefer any further communication on this matter go through my legal counsel." I gave him Evelyn Reed's name and number. "This can be resolved without lawyers, MS. Vance," he said, a note of condescension creeping in. "The firm is prepared to be reasonable." "I'm sure you are," I said, and gently ended the call. 20 minutes later, Mr. Davies himself called. I let it go to voicemail. His message was clipped and angry. "Alara, do not be foolish. Call me back." Instead, I called Maya, the ceramicist Annalise had been so fond of. "Maya, hi. It's Alara. I just wanted to let you know I've officially opened my own consultancy. I'm no longer with Sterling." "Oh, thank heavens," she said, her voice filled with relief. "Some man named Marcus Thorne called me this morning. Terribly pushy. Said he was my new account manager. I told him I'd have to think about it." She paused. "So, you're on your own now? That's wonderful. Send me the new contract." Nothing changes for us. One by one, I made the calls. Each conversation was a balm to my soul. The weaver, the furniture maker, the vintner, they had all been contacted by Sterling. And they had all been waiting for my call. Their loyalty wasn't to a corporate logo, it was to Annalise and now to me. By the end of the day, I had confirmation from all 23 clients. They were with me. The following week, Evelyn called. "They're escalating," she said. "They've sent a cease and desist letter. They're threatening a lawsuit for damages, claiming you stole proprietary information. But the client agreements are ironclad," she finished. "This is posturing, Alara. They're trying to scare you into submission. They're counting on you not having the resources or the nerve to fight back." "They don't know me very well," I said, a flicker of Annalise's resolve in my voice. "No, they don't," Evelyn agreed. "I've responded, attaching copies of all 23 transfer agreements. That should quiet them down for a bit while their legal team tries to figure out how they were so thoroughly outmaneuvered." The next few weeks were a blur of focused, joyful work. I furnished my new office with pieces from my client's hand-carved walnut desk, woven tapestries for the walls, and beautiful, simple ceramics to hold pens and flowers. The space felt alive, infused with the creativity and integrity of the people I was now privileged to work for. The quiet, however, didn't last. Sterling's next move was more insidious. They couldn't force the clients back legally, so they started a campaign of subtle sabotage. They began spreading rumors within the industry that my small firm was financially unstable. They contacted my clients' suppliers and partners, raising doubts about my ability to provide the same level of support as a large firm. The first real test came from Samuel, the vintner. He called me one afternoon, his voice heavy with worry. "Alara, my distributor just got a call from someone at Sterling. They offered him exclusive access to a larger portfolio of wines if he dropped my label. They told him my business was at risk now that I was with a boutique, one-woman operation." My blood ran cold. This wasn't just business, it was a targeted attack designed to cripple my client. "What did you tell him, Samuel?" "I told him my wine has won more awards than any in his current portfolio, and my partnership with you is based on a decade of trust, not threats. But, Alara, this is my livelihood." They're playing dirty. I knew I couldn't fight Sterling on their terms. I didn't have their resources or their ruthlessness. I had to use what Annalise had taught me, to think differently, to build connections where they saw only transactions. That evening, I didn't call Evelyn. I called 2 other clients from the Artisan portfolio, a celebrated chef with 3 restaurants in the city, and the owner of a chain of high-end organic markets. I explained the situation. The next morning, the chef called Samuel's distributor and placed an order for his entire vintage for all 3 of her restaurants. An hour later, the market owner called and offered Samuel a promotional feature in all 12 of her stores. By noon, Samuel's distribution problem had become an expansion opportunity. When he called me back, he was laughing. "I don't know how you did it, Alara, but Sterling's little threat just became the best thing that's happened to my business all year." That was the turning point. I realized my power wasn't in fighting Sterling, it was in strengthening the community I was building. When they tried to isolate one client, I brought 3 others together. We were creating a network of mutual support, an ecosystem of artisans and entrepreneurs who valued collaboration over competition. Sterling's desperation grew. One evening, I received a text from a number I didn't recognize. "Alara, it's Liam. From the old office. Can we talk? It's important." Liam was a junior analyst who had been promoted around the same time I had been overlooked. He was ambitious, but had always seemed to possess a conscience that the others lacked. We met at a quiet cafe far from the financial district. He looked exhausted, the corporate polish worn thin. "They're going after Annalise's estate," he said, getting straight to the point. "They've frozen her final payout, her charitable bequests. They're claiming breach of fiduciary duty and are using it as leverage to try and get her sister to pressure you." A wave of pure fury washed over me. This was a new low, even for them. Attacking a grieving family was despicable. "Why are you telling me this, Liam?" I asked, my voice tight. He stared into his cup. "Annalise once stopped them from making me the scapegoat on a project that went south. She did it quietly. Never said a word. I owe her. And what they're doing is wrong." He hesitated. "They're building a case. Trying to paint you as a manipulator who took advantage of a dying woman. Marcus is leading it. They offered me a significant bonus to provide a statement supporting their narrative." "And what did you say?" "I told them I needed to think about it." He looked up, his eyes meeting mine. "There's no evidence because it's not true. You were the only one who treated her like a person at the end, not just a name on a door." I thanked him, my anger tempered by a sliver of hope. Perhaps the whole system wasn't rotten. When I got home, a formal-looking envelope was waiting for me. It was an offer from Sterling Advisory Group. They were offering me a senior partnership corner office, executive salary, a seat at the tab leaf. I agreed to return the Artisan portfolio to the firm's management. I looked at the letter, at the desperate, stunning hypocrisy of it all. They had fired me, tried to sue me, attempted to sabotage my clients, and were holding a dead woman's legacy hostage. And now they wanted to reward me for my supposed treachery, all to fix their quarterly numbers. I placed the letter on my desk next to a vase of Maya's simple, elegant ceramics. I thought of Annalise's words, "Let them show you who they are." They had. The next morning, I didn't call Evelyn. I didn't respond to the offer. Instead, I drove to the bank and opened the safe deposit box. Inside, beneath the file with the client transfer agreements, was another, thicker file, sealed with wax and marked with a single word, contingency. I had never opened it. Annalise had given it to me with a grave look. "You will only open this if they go after my family or my name. Not for business, Alara. Only for justice." They had done both. I broke the seal. Inside was not just a contingency plan, it was a meticulously documented history of Sterling's deepest secrets. For years, Annalise had been collecting evidence of systematic financial misconduct within the firm, inflated billing, hidden fees, and a complex scheme to mislead shareholders by misrepresenting the value of certain assets. It was all there, copies of altered invoices, internal emails, and a detailed ledger tracing the flow of money. She had tried to report it internally and had been subtly punished for it. This portfolio was her insurance policy. At the bottom of the file was a letter addressed to me. "Alara," it read, "if you are reading this, they have pushed too far. I am sorry to leave you with this burden, but I could not trust anyone else to see it through. This is not about revenge. It is about accountability. The clients I gave you were not just a gift, they were lifeboats. I wanted them safe before the ship went down. What you do with this information is your choice, but remember what we talked about. The only way to win a rigged game is to build your own. Sometimes, that means clearing the ground first." My hands were shaking. This was never just about me starting a new firm. It was about dismantling a corrupt one. I called Evelyn and told her what I had found. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "My God," she finally whispered. She was playing chess while they were playing checkers. We met that afternoon. After reviewing the contents of the file, Evelyn made a single phone call to a contact she had at the Securities and Exchange Commission. The storm Annalise had predicted was about to break. And I was standing in the calm, quiet eye of it, ready for whatever came next. The fallout was not a storm, it was a quiet, systematic demolition. 2 days after Evelyn's call, 2 SEC investigators arrived unannounced at Sterling's gleaming headquarters. The news broke on a financial wire service first, a small, cryptic headline about a federal inquiry at a major Port Meridian consulting firm. By noon, the company's stock had dipped. By the end of the day, after a leak confirmed the investigation was for financial fraud, it was in freefall. My phone lit up. Clients, journalists, even Liam. I answered none of them. I sat in my quiet office, watching the river flow, and followed the plan. I spent the day working, finalizing a new project for the textile mill, reviewing a new product line for the weaver. My work was my anchor. The next morning, the CEO, Mr. Davies, and 2 other senior partners were placed on administrative leave. Marcus Thorne was named in the press as a person of interest, not for his role in the fraud, but for his attempts to suppress Annalise's initial reports. Liam's refusal to give a false statement had been noted. That afternoon, Annalise's sister called me, her voice thick with emotion. The firm's lawyers had contacted her. Annalise's full estate, including all charitable donations, was being released immediately, with a formal apology from the board for the administrative delay. "They know," her sister whispered. "They know she's the one who did this. She just wanted what was right," I said. A week later, I was formally interviewed by the investigators. I walked them through Annalise's files, explaining the context of her quiet war against the firm's decay. I told them about her mentorship, about her belief in ethical business, and about the artisan portfolio, which she had rescued before the implosion. I never used the word revenge. I used the word accountability. In the months that followed, Sterling Advisory Group was dismantled piece by piece. Executives resigned, the board was replaced, and the firm was eventually acquired for a fraction of its former worth by a competitor. Its name, once a symbol of prestige, was now a cautionary tale. My firm, Vance and Croft Consulting, grew. The story of the artisan portfolio became a quiet legend in the business community. We were sought out by clients who were tired of the old games, who wanted to build businesses based on trust and mutual respect. I hired Clara, my former colleague, who had left Sterling the day the investigation was announced. I also hired Liam. He started at the bottom, eager to learn a new way of doing business, a way he could be proud of. 6 months after that final, fateful day, a package arrived at my office. It was from Annalise's sister. Inside was a framed photograph of Annalise, not in a corporate setting, but standing on a windswept beach, smiling at something beyond the camera's view. There was also a letter. Elara, it began, in Annalise's familiar, elegant script. It was the letter she had written for me, to be delivered once the dust had settled. My dear Elara, if you are reading this, it means you were as brave and as brilliant as I knew you would be. I hope you are not surrounded by wreckage, but by the clear ground of a new beginning. I did not choose you simply because you were competent. I chose you because you were kind. In a world of sharks, you were the person who stopped to see if someone was okay. You never lost your humanity in that place, and that is a rare and powerful thing. The business I left you is a foundation. What you build upon it is your story. Create the firm we always wished we worked for. Be successful, of course, but more than that, be significant. Nurture your clients. Champion integrity. And never, ever let anyone make you feel small for being thoughtful in a world that rewards bravado. My greatest accomplishment was not the money I made or the deals I closed. It was finding you. You were my legacy long before you inherited a single client. With deepest respect and affection. Annalise. I placed the photograph on the sill of my office window, where the afternoon sun would catch it. The gentle reconciliation I had hoped for was not with the men who had wronged me, but with the memory of the woman who had saved me. The firm had offered me a partnership, a seat at their table. But Annalise had given me something infinitely more valuable, the courage to build my own. Looking out at the river, at the endless, steady flow of the water, I felt a profound sense of peace. The story wasn't about the fall of Sterling Advisory Group. It was about the rise of Vance and Croft Consulting. It wasn't about revenge. It was about restoration. And it was just beginning.